Pod. This is going to be so fun for me. Hi, I'm Amy Porter, and this is my podcast. My mission is to show people how to empower themselves through music, business, and media. I try to see as clearly as possible how I can help. I showcase the music that I've played and the people I've met along the way. I'm a wife and a stepmom. You might know me as a professor, a performer, a producer, a publisher, a recording artist. I'm the founder of a couple of nonprofits. Welcome in to my PorterFlute Pod.
Welcome to PorterFlute Pod. I'm so happy you're here.
I've dressed in my best 80s garb, so I have the hair and everything, and then I have the powder puff so that if I sweat a lot, I'll just do this. If I start talking about Bernstein and it gets stressful, I'll just go like this. So ladies, just welcome to PorterFlute Pod.
Woohoo! So good to be here.
This is a 1987 reunion at Tanglewood Music Center.
We were all 2 years old.
No, we were not. It was my second year there, and I just remember feeling just so grateful that I got invited back. And so I just wanted to kind of set the stage. Where were you all? I know I was at Juilliard. Like I said, I had just been there, but where were you all? Regina, let's start with you.
Okay, I was at Indiana University working on my master's, but I was leaving because after Tanglewood, I was going to start my job in the Honolulu Symphony, which is now called the Hawaii Symphony.
I remember that because everybody in the Boston Symphony was so jealous of you because they wanted to get the heck out of Massachusetts and go to Honolulu for a year.
It is nice there.
Allison, how about you?
So I was doing the same thing. I was working on my master's degree at the Cleveland Institute of Music with Jeffrey Kainer. And I went back and did my second year after Tanglewood. So I was still in school. I did not go to Honolulu, sadly.
So I was in my master's degree, and I had just returned from the Juilliard tour of China and Japan. I was exhausted. And I just remember feeling like it was a place where I could just focus in on what I wanted to do. I didn't have to travel. I didn't have to do much. And for me, I will never forget calling it my heaven on earth as a musician, as a person, as a sponge learning. So I don't know, did you feel that Tanglewood represented that for you?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I mean, I can say this, that I think you and I, the first thing we did together, Amy, was we played with Leon Fleischer. I know we're here to talk about Bernstein, but Leon Fleischer was there conducting. And I remember we were playing Mozart, and it was like the music came alive. I mean, I think the thing that was the most wonderful for me were these really famous musicians. And you saw in them not only like yourself in a certain way. Like they still were working musicians. They still had to practice. They still had to think about what they were doing. But they really saw themselves as channels, as conduits. And they were like taking Mozart into their hands and then giving it to us and asking us to do what we do. I mean, I felt so respected at the same time that I was learning and soaking that in. But I remember that being like my most vivid memory.
Oh my gosh, music was a sacred thing.
Sacred, yeah.
Going to Tanglewood was like on my bucket list. And so I auditioned 3 times until I finally got in. And I kept going in with, I remember you had to play 2 solos of your choice at the audition and then excerpts. So one of mine, I decided I'd play the piccolo, like something really flashy. So the year before, I went there, I was like waitlisted or something. So the next year I went in and I played the exact same one and they were like, oh, we remember you. So one reason why it was on my bucket list was because I really wanted to stay with Lois Schaefer. I grew up watching her play in the Boston Pops on TV, and she's the reason why I wanted to play the piccolo. So I really wanted to stay with Lois, and then Lois had a house that was really close to Tanglewood, so I would walk over once a week and take lessons with her, and so it ended up becoming a real dream for me. Besides, I always really wanted to play under Bernstein too, because my undergraduate conductors were always talking about how he was the epitome. He was the best conductor, and they were always talking about him. So it was like a dream come true to go to Tanglewood.
Tanglewood was incredible. So I don't know if you remember, but I had a concerto to play, and I have to tell you the first time meeting Bernstein was after that concerto. So I think we'll just segue into this. The reason we're here is to just give our memories of Leonard Bernstein, because when the Maestro movie came out, I was super hesitant to watch it because I knew I'd be so emotional. And finally last night I watched it and it's fresh and I didn't cry because I was ready. I'm sure. No, I just really want to talk about Lenny in our podcast. So I just have to say that you never know who's in the audience. And I'll start with how I met Bernstein, if you don't mind. Well, oh my gosh, ladies, I'm swabbing out in the back. We always remember things when we're swabbing our flutes. Swabbing out, and I there's a knock on the door, and it's like, Amy Porter, Leonard Bernstein wants to meet you. And I was like, what? And I opened the door. There was at least 5 people before he showed up. So it was like somebody to tell me that he was coming, and then someone else to tell me he was on his way, and then the third person to tell me he was backstage, and then the fourth person to say, are you ready? And here I am like, okay. And then he showed up in his cape in those tiny back rooms in our little shed, not the big shed, but the little, remember before they built the new one? Tiny little backstage rooms, 1 mirror, 1 little thing, and then a wall. And I am meeting Leonard Bernstein in his cape, and he literally kisses me and slobbers all over me. He's so sweaty, and I'm like, this is amazing, but it's gross, but it's amazing. Okay. And then he told me, my darling. And then he came out, and was just like, you were magnificent, and just doing all of his. I mean, the movie was correct. He was this ball of love. He loved every single person, every single note, anything that ever happened in the world, he loved. And so he loved me at that moment. And I don't know if you ever felt the love of Leonard Bernstein like that, but he proceeded to befriend me for the week he was there. Oh my gosh, you guys, it was amazing. So that's my story. Regina, do you have a story? Do you have a story about meeting him for the very first time? Like, oh my God, I'm talking to this guy.
I don't remember when I first met him. I just remember that after concerts, there would be these like parties, because of course this is the 80s and everybody was like into dancing, right? And so they would have these parties where everybody would be dancing. And I remember I was getting my nerve up to go over and talk to him. And when I did, same thing, like hugged me, said, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for you to come over here and talk to me all evening. He just had this incredible love of people. He loved everyone, and you felt it. And I feel like it made us play better too. And it made us colleagues rather than going against one another.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a beautiful statement. I think that's really true. I don't have a memory as beautiful and as specific as you guys in terms of meeting him. I don't remember, but I do recall how it felt to play in the orchestra, and kind of segueing from what Regina was saying in terms of like this sense of us being this this organism. I mean, we were individuals and we had our individual parts, we had our individual contribution, and our individual talents, but somehow, it was like we were more than the sum of our parts. I mean, clearly that's the goal of an orchestra, right? And so maybe that's the thing that's most natural in him. He loved everybody, but that he really understood what it meant to be like this human, gigantic organization, especially because we played the Rite of Spring. It was like so many musicians on stage, and to make it kind of come together. I think the thing that really stuck with me, like the most memorable piece of him, was not just that he loved everyone, but that everything was kinetic with him. And I think they caught that in the movie too. There's a sense of, the dance, the movement, the expression of your body. And I mean, how better can you do that than being a conductor, I guess. But I remember the year after that, it was like really soon after that, I went back to the Cleveland Institute of Music, and Pierre Boulez was working with the Cleveland Orchestra and came and conducted the students and did the same pieces. And it was so interesting because Pierre Boulez was like controlled. And it was sort of like studying Messiaen's organ music or something. There was something very intellectual, and it was wonderful. But when you were with Bernstein, it was completely from inside. I mean, clearly he was thinking about everything he wrote, he was conducting and everything that was written, but it was like this instinct or this, sense of movement. I can't think of any other word than that. So that really stuck with me. And as a person who like basically makes my living now moving, I really connect with that.
You guys, remember the alternate ending he had for Rite of Spring?
Yeah.
It was okay, everybody who's listening, we are from the era where if you could play the Beatles albums backwards and there was some cryptic message, like there was okay, so this is like that. Like Bernstein gets up and he goes, I'm going to try my way. And didn't he come up with it with Aaron Copland or something? I don't know, but it was just awful. And it was in 4/4 or something dumb like that.
I just remember the sacrificial dance. Wasn't it Kusevitsky who wanted it in 4?
Okay, then it was Kusevitsky, not Aaron Copland.
And so he rebarred it. Like if you go through and you figure out all the beats, it eventually comes to the right place in 4. But and what he did was he conducted, but his body, his hips, his whole being. I know. I mean, it was fantastic. Everybody after that just had to have sex, right?
But I think after all was said and done, we did the original way because it wasn't working. And we were all like, no, this isn't what we studied.
We were like
at music school.
Yeah. What's the word for that? When you're like co-conspirators with him, like there was the other ending and the whole orchestra, like as one was like, no, faces like that.
Well, what I love, there's a couple of quotes in the movie, but the biggest one was Edna St. Vincent Millay. If summer doesn't sing in you, then nothing sings in you. And if nothing sings in you, then you can't make music. Yeah. And it starts with if summer, and you're like, Tanglewood. That was his place. And at the end of the movie, when they, we'll talk about the movie later, but the last scene of just pulling up in front of the shed, that happened all the time. You're like, oh, there's Lenny again, parking on the grass. Okay, so my next question is what pieces we played. Okay, so what we learned about ourselves and our music making. We played Rite of Spring, as we mentioned before, and I got the alto flute part. And there's, that I call it the, I think it was some kind of like snaky solo, right? So there's that. And then and take a breath, and then you don't need another one. Okay, well, he stops and he says, because I had played a concerto the night before, I believe, he stops and he says, hello, Amy. And I just, hello. Because we had a really, really nice evening the night before. And the whole orchestra's looking at me. And he says to the orchestra, I know Amy from last night. Okay, so then I die right there. I die right there.
All the eyes go right onto you.
Well, what did you do? What, nothing. I was like, I was backstage. And he goes, Amy, you need to play that whole thing in one breath. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to try, and what do you say to him? And I just nodded, like I teach my students, just nod, smile and nod. So I did it. I eventually did it. And I was interviewed, by the Boston Globe, like the next day. And they were running around saying, I don't know if you were, but they were running saying, how is it to play with Bernstein? And I said, if Bernstein asks you to play something in one breath, you play it in one breath. I'll never forget that impact. So he would stretch things, you know what I mean? So that long Rite of Spring solo was longer than ever.
And don't take a breath.
No. Oh my God. So do you have any other memories from the Rite of Spring or something else?
Well, I played with him in Japan for the Pacific Music Festival because he founded that festival. Right. And that festival originally was supposed to be in China, but Tiananmen Square happened. Oh, and so they moved the whole thing to Japan, and it's been there ever since. And we had a lot of time with him there. And it was great. And in Japan, they were filming everything. I mean, because it was Bernstein, and they loved Bernstein too. And I just, we played in Suntory Hall with him, and I did get to play first flute. We did Schumann Symphony No. 2, and after that, he flew to Tanglewood to conduct the Boston Symphony. And so 4 months after we had played with him is when he passed away. So we were really sad, and we were so happy that we got all this time with him. And it was, I remember one thing. They made a DVD out of it. So and so I won't be quoting this perfectly, but we were playing something, and then he stopped and he said, he told us how to do it differently. And then he stopped again and he said, that is orchestral playing. That is the difference between just playing a gig and playing an orchestra. And I know that sounds silly, but it's like, perfecting your craft. Like, what are you doing? Like, it's not just for money, but it's for the beauty, and for perfecting your craft. And so that was really special. And I just also, what she did write in the book was something about me saying, when he made you feel as if you were going to play the best you ever did, and then you did.
Exactly.
So like he totally believed in you, and he was pulling it out of you. It was just like complete joy.
Yeah. I mean, how does a person get that way? Because a lot of times conductors can give you this feeling of you're about to come in, and then it's like they have the hand, or there's they're not sure, but somehow somebody who can invite, so more than maybe that you even thought you could do. I mean, I think that's a real gift. He felt like, I mean, at least for me as a student, it felt like that he was exactly where he belonged as a teacher, really, for us. He was conducting us. We were young professionals, but we were on the verges of our careers. We weren't in our careers really yet, and so he was kind of bringing out in us something great. I mean, that's like a special person.
It's like a complete trust. It's like he just trusted us.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's such a great story, Regina. How cool. What was the picture that you showed earlier where he's coming up and kissing you? What was that?
Oh, that was in Japan and Suntory Hall. So after we were done, he came through the orchestra and had a stand. And when he did, he kissed my hand. So all these people were like, have you washed your hands since then? Yes, I have.
I have a photo of him hugging me as well on my wall in my studio. So I'll make sure that goes up for everyone to see on the website. We'll share on PorterFlute.com all the pictures that we have. So I have a question or thoughts from my two producers. Izzy and Ella want us to talk about how to act with our orchestral colleagues when you're playing in a section. I don't mean to kind of go into orchestral etiquette. I just mean to say that I suppose Bernstein fostered that kind of love for music, and then you just love each other and you just are trying to do the best you can, and there's no room for jealousy we all got along famously. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was
testament.
yeah.
How many years later and we're all still friends. I mean, there was just something about that, I think, that he did. But right, it's like everybody has their their skills, their talents, the things they're better at, the things they're not as good at, and their gifts. And there's room for everybody, I think, has always really helped me. When I think there's of an abundance and attitude rather than a scarcity. And I think that's really difficult when you're going to auditions or when you're, competing, is you feel like there's just not enough, there's not enough, there's not enough. And the most important thing to do is to kind of be who you are and do the best you can and believe there is room for everyone and everybody has a voice to share, and you can learn from each other. I definitely did. I was a horrible piccolo player. I still am. But but Regina had things to say. Try this fingering. Boom.
Right. So if you adopt this attitude of, there's room for everyone, and my abundance is my abundance, and I have only what I can offer. Someone else, can do what they do. It's a much more healthy section, flute section.
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure. Let's talk about a couple of final memories of Tanglewood before we move to the movie. Again, I think I told you that Lenny was always driving through the gate in his convertible Cadillac or whatever that was. And one day, I just remember him being late to rehearsal like a lot. And the assistant conductors would have a little moment to be able to conduct, and then all of a sudden there'd be the car, and he'd run in and run up, and it was like he had never been late or no apologies. He just said, let's go. I remember being backstage. We were all in the shed, the big hall, but we weren't on yet. We were doing a side-by-side or something with the Boston Symphony. I don't know, but I heard, Porter, where's Porter? And it was the Boston Symphony's personnel manager, and he said, Fenwick is late. He'll be here in 20 minutes. We need you to sub for 20 minutes. Can you play second flute? And I was like, okay. But then I realized what they were playing. Okay, so everybody listen to this. It was Porgy and Bess. Oh. And it was that part that we hear all the percussionists play. Okay, guys, we have to play that too. And I was like sight reading this thing that nobody ever told me I had to play too. When I heard it in Juilliard. So in Juilliard back in the 80s, percussionists practice in the hallway. So I heard this excerpt ad nauseum, and there I was like, you've got to be kidding me. It was awful. But anyway, I played in the Boston Symphony for 20 minutes. That was fun. And then my final memory of Tanglewood is right here. So here I am, the year before I met you all. I'm in 1986. I'm freaking out. Okay, so it's Jackie and Joanna and Mark and Adam and then me. And I'm the only one without a job. And I have to play principal on Hindemith Symphonic Metamorphosis. And this photographer is outside taking pictures. It's like 9:15 in the morning. And he said, may I take your photo? And I said, no. I was nervous. I was like, I have to play this solo. So I turned around and I started walking away from him. And I literally remember thinking, thank God I don't have to deal with him. And then forgot all about it. So fast forward, talk about weird. 7 years later, my student goes to Tanglewood and sends me a postcard. She said, I know this is you. This has got to be you. And I was like, oh my God, that's me. And the first thing I thought of was, thank God I wore a slip. Because that was,
I was looking right through that.
That hat was from a boy I met in Salzburg. I had that white dress forever, and I had to wear one of those nude slips that your mom made you wear, remember? And so this is the original photo. My mother had it. The man was still alive. Remember the famous photographer in Lenox? And he was always there. Oh my gosh, I forget his name, but we got a hold of him and he gave me the original. Isn't it beautiful?
Yeah. Yes. So he took the picture anyway when you turned your back.
Oh,
Yeah.
photographers are waiting for you to say no.
The illegal picture, but it's
So
beautiful.
this is a postcard from a time in 1986. And if anybody listening ever goes to Tanglewood and it's still there, just send it to me. In Ann Arbor, I'm ready to post it. So any final memories on Tanglewood?
I remember that we did the Festival of Contemporary Music, and we were playing from like 4 a.m. till 2 p.m, whatever. And then we would have those dances that Regina was talking about. I mean, I can't even imagine the kind of energy that we mustered to do that. And the music was hard.
It was hard.
Hard. And it was just sort of handed to you. It was like the ink was still kind of, a little bit damp. And you had to play this stuff. And but I remember it being, I mean, you were mentioning earlier, I loved that thing about the gig versus the, orchestral player. And, in a sense, you had to be like a gigger. It's like, it's time, I got to perform this, I have coaching, blah, blah, blah. But on the other hand, it was like, wow, what a gift to be forced to, learn this music that it's never going to be played again. And wasn't Oliver Knussen there? Wasn't he there?
Yes.
Ollie Newson.
I have a story with him.
Oh,
Bless
I
his heart.
love him.
Yes, I have a story with him about that. So if you remember, Jenny Connors, she was there too, but she got sick and she had to leave like, I don't know, a week or two before it was over. And we were doing that contemporary music. So she was gone and they'd already had the rehearsal and I had to sub in on her part and there was no rehearsal. So Oliver Newsom was talking me through it backstage. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, like this isn't what I thought Tanglewood would be. That's okay. And I didn't really into this part of it. And then just going out, just like what you're saying, Alison, and at that point you were in gig mode because you'd never rehearsed it. You'd never seen it. He just talked to me and now we're performing it. And it was kind of crazy. Yeah. But
yeah. I mean, we weren't just students. We were performers. We were the integral part of what was being presented at Tanglewood. I mean, when you think from like an audience perspective, I mean, we weren't just there to learn. We were there also to produce, which is, pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I have an amazing memory of going somewhere and hearing Itzhak Perlman and John Williams at the piano, and they were premiering Schindler's List to a bunch of donors. Don't ask me how I got into that hang, but I stood in the back of the room, and that was epic.
Oh, I love that story. Do you guys remember that James Galway came and played 2 concertos? Do you remember that? And he gave an entire recital before it. And we were all just like, oh, Galway, oh, come on, he's a showman, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we were a little bad attitude. And he came in and he played that Mercadante, which is like it goes on forever and a day. And then the Nielsen. And before it, he gave a recital. And I think all of us were sitting together going like, okay, I admit the guy can play.
Yeah, Jimmy live, there's nothing better.
Yeah.
Nothing better. I remember seeing him at Tanglewood. So I went to BUTI when I was a baby. I don't know, but it was before Brevard. And I was a baby at Brevard. So I go to BUTI with Dorio. And I heard in the first row, Dorio play the Griffiths poem with the Boston Symphony. Mm-hmm. And I remember when she hit the da 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 da, I went, she's playing it wrong. It goes faster than that. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, it's only più mosso. And this woman knew exactly what she was doing. That was such a pivotal moment for me. Again, when we're all that between the ages of 14 and 22, sorry to my listeners, but when you think you're all that, please just knock it down a couple of pegs and say, there's some people out there I can learn from. It's not my way. So yeah, that was the first time I ever heard Griffiths played properly with an orchestra. That was incredible. The Boston Symphony was amazing back then. And we heard Manny Axe, Yo-Yo Ma, and Isaac Stern play trios.
Yeah.
Now, back then we were like, I just want to go to the party. I'm so bored. I'm getting bit out here on the lawn. But no, that was just the most beautiful music. Do you remember all that?
Yeah. 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 I went back.
And if you think of it too, I mean, we had master classes with all of them, with all the flutists. I mean, a master class with Dorio. I mean, she's historical. And there she was teaching us, or of course, Lois or Fenwick. I still remember this amazing master class with him when he was saying, as a second flutist, you have to be so in tune with, not in tune, sharp or flat, but like in tune with the first player. And he did this exercise where he was like, okay, you stand behind me, and when you play, then I will come in and play, and not looking at us. And he was nailing it every single time. And I always remembered that. I was like, wow, that's the perfect second player. Like, you're just so in sync with that person. Like, I don't know how he was doing it, but it was amazing. And yeah.
Oh, Fenwick, remember he would invite us all to his cabin that he was building.
I know. I miss Fenwick. He was such a lovely, lovely person too. I mean, not just a wonderful player, but I mean, clearly, as you say, with this kind of matching someone, there was a generosity in his spirit. So much. I remember Dorio we did the Poulenc sextet, and she wanted us to get this kind of quality of sound. And she was yes, I love you. She was singing this, and we were all like, oh my God, she's nuts. But, and it was all men.
I could never get like what she wanted. She would, even when I was 14, and then again at 22.
Yeah.
I loved it.
I loved it. Let's go back. Do you think they'll invite us back this year?
Alumni orchestra.
Well, I have to say that I got to know Bernstein in a really sweet way, and Michael Tilson Thomas was the conductor out in LA Philharmonic Institute. Yeah. So you were saying, Regina, that you were part of the first Pacific Music Festival. Well, I was part of the first LA Philharmonic Institute. And it was Michael Tilson Thomas, and Bernstein was the advisor, and Jeffrey Babcock was the manager at the time. Michael Tilson Thomas and Jeffrey Babcock approached me in LA Philharmonic Institute and say, we're starting an orchestra in Miami, and we'd like for you to be principal flute. And I said, okay, what does it pay? And they said $200 a week. And I said, well, I have an opportunity to go back to my alma mater, Juilliard, for a master's, and I think I could do it in 1 year. And I would rather take my time and get a master's in that way. And then my life shifted. So I just wonder about all the decisions we make, how the groundbreaking New World Symphony, there I had the opportunity to do it, and I turned it down. I've turned down a lot of things. I went to Atlanta Symphony, just with eyes closed, not knowing, because it wasn't really the path I wanted, but I just went anyway. And if I had stayed, Ms. Backstresser was hoping I would sub in the New York Philharmonic. I mean, there are all these decisions we make. So I decided not to go to New World, and I really don't regret it. Okay, so we all agree that the Maestro movie was amazing?
Yes.
Okay, Alison, what's up?
I did cry at the end, especially when they went to Tanglewood with real musicians. I felt there was a disconnect from when he's conducting the Mahler, and and you're in an experience of this, amazing genius. And the kind of, sometimes it felt a little lurid. It was like they didn't explore what his real relationships were. I mean, he wasn't having affairs so much as he was having long-term relationships. And yeah, it was a struggle, especially at that time. But I sometimes felt that it was trying to make it sensationalized rather than really exploring the great conducting and great man he is. But I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not a filmmaker. I don't know how you tell that story. How do you tell the story of what it means to be a musician? It's very difficult to, you see a composer, they have the music playing and they're writing and they're scribbling. I mean, that's not really what it's like to be a creative person. So that was a little bit, I felt disconnected from it a little bit. I did find it beautiful that the dancing pieces in the beginning was glorious. The relationship with his wife was beautiful. And the end was my favorite. So yeah.
I loved the fantasy that they had running from one room into Carnegie Hall.
Yes. Yeah. That was really
That
cool.
was great. And all the Leonard Bernstein soundtracks were there. I love how they had, at least I had the subtitles on. I rarely do that, but I did it, and they had all the credits, every piece. That was really great. I just feel like it delves into his complex personal life only to the point that Hollywood could do that and maintain a relationship with the watcher. The person watching the movie, I don't really think cares about a composer, but they really are interested in how Felicia Montalegre could deal with his extramarital affairs, and that sells tickets.
I love the movie. I feel like we're looking at it through a different eyes because we worked with him and we knew who he was. And so we didn't have to fill in the blank. I'm wondering if somebody who doesn't know who Leonard Bernstein is at all, just knew he wrote West Side Story or something, watched the movie, if they would understand it. Like, for instance, when they're in, I don't know, I forget where they were, in a church or cathedral or something, and they're playing Mahler. And so I'm assuming, well, this is the New York Philharmonic probably playing Mahler, that he was so famous conducting them, with Mahler. But but they don't say that. So the general public's not going to make that connection, And is that important? I don't know. I mean, to me it is, because I want them to know it all.
Right, right.
Oh my gosh. All this stuff was televised half the time. And my mother would be screaming from the room, Amy, get in here. He's doing all the Beethoven. One year was all Beethoven and one year was all Mahler. And they would just put this on PBS and you'd have to watch it live. And she'd make sure I saw Leonard Bernstein on the television. And it was so remarkable to meet him in person that when I did come into ownership of the photos of him hugging me, it was given to me a couple summers later. My mother stole them. She's like, I'm taking that. That's mine. And when she passed away, literally, I took it off the wall at her house. I was like, Mom, this is me. She was so proud, though, that she got me to the point where I got to hang with Lenny.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you think that we'll ever go back to that kind of time? I mean, is it a specific moment to have a man who was he was so handsome, he was so charismatic, he could do all things, performer, composer, conductor, and he brought these educational programs right into our homes. And I mean, we had the great, privilege and honor to know him and to work with him. But will we ever have that again in classical music in our lifetime?
I hope so. So one thing that you're bringing out that resonates with me is both Leonard Bernstein and then, of course, Michael Tilson Thomas, who was his student, right? Mm-hmm. That they both were totally into education, right? Yeah. And I look at so many famous conductors who don't seem to be doing anything like this at all, and maybe they're even putting their nose up at it. I don't know, but I know that I have plenty of musician friends that are like, I don't want to teach, or they look down on it. But it's like, no, this is so important. And why are you like that? I mean, look at Leonard Bernstein was never like that. He totally wanted to pass it on and teach and embrace everyone and bring them all in. So I think that's something I really learned from him too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wasn't that an amazing line that Felicia says? All anyone needs is to be sensitive to others. Kindness, kindness, kindness.
Yeah.
And she's dying. And whether or not she died in his arms for real, I fell hook like line and sinker for that. And when he cried in the pillow, that was some great acting right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And she died.
Well, so I don't know if you guys know that last year I had breast cancer. And so when I saw that scene, it was, not the scene, but the entire portion of her diagnosis, et cetera. It was just wrenching. And somebody just sent me an article. It's so interesting from an oncologist about, they call them, it's actually in one of the Boston papers, the men who will hold your purse, like which kind of men you want to have been married to. I mean, I guess you could be married to a woman, but your partner through something like breast cancer, you want it to be the person that's there, sitting there while you're having your treatments, holding your purse. It's with you, through sickness and health. And I think what really struck me, and I mean, I imagine whether the actual things they said in the moments were actually true is Hollywood, but he did go home. He went back. He was with the family. And all of those hugs of everyone together it tells you a lot about the person he was. That he's not going to abandon his wife, even though they were separating. I mean, they were moving apart, but he was with her to the end, and that's that takes a very, very special person.
The end of her life was in 1978, and he was devastated. And I remember he even had his children visiting Tanglewood. I met
Jamie.
I met Jamie. Yeah, I met Jamie. I never met Nina, but I met Jamie. And I never met his son.
Yeah.
But everybody just wanted to kind of put him in a category. And he was the first person to deny all categorization. But you're gay. Well, but you're married. Well, but you're a actor. Well, you're a composer. Well, And remember, he would, in the movie, this was true. Like, Bradley Cooper had his breathing down perfectly. Like, the guy was Leonard Bernstein so well. But even the frustration of like, but I really want to sit and compose. And when he was asked, how do you compose? He's like, well, I have to be alone. And it kind of comes out. And his writing, it was just beautiful. It was just beautiful. He just was searching for, when he wasn't doing what he was doing, he just was searching to do it.
There was something else that really struck me too, when he was because the movie starts after a lot of his popular music, his Broadway music, and he was kind of putting that down a little bit, like, oh, that's the easy stuff. Do you remember that in the movie? And I thought, oh, that was so fun. I mean, we heralded as some of the greatest music ever written in the canon of popular music or Broadway music. But he sort of, oh, that's the easy stuff, because he really wanted, it's the Mahler and the period. And I found that so fascinating that even he kind of, all of these talents, he has his hand in everything,
Yeah, writing the ballets. I mean, it was incredible. Felicia was the one to say, you can do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Because she was the actress, and he loved that about her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting, the movie did not cover like all the music that we usually play of Leonard Bernstein, right? They mentioned West Side Story one time when they were interviewing him it was the Ed Sullivan Show, and he said, so what keeps you busy, Felicia? And all she could talk about was his projects. Yeah. And that's where she mentions West Side Story. That's it.
Yeah.
There's so much that they didn't get into. And I think it's just for lack of, interest from major Hollywood viewers. So that's why we're having this discussion today, because when that movie came out, I thought, oh my gosh, I have so many stories and nowhere to put it. But now we have a place to put it. Are there any final love notes put out there so we can, hit home that Leonard Bernstein was as magical as he was portrayed in the movie?
Regina really hit it on the head when she talked about how he reached in and reached towards us and brought more out of us, invited us, had a trust in us. And I think that if you can take that, anyone listening to this now, maybe your students or aspiring musicians or musicians in a rut or anybody, any creative, the more you can trust that piece of yourself, I don't play flute anymore really, but I write and it's how do you inspire yourself? Well, you have to have ass in the seat, right? They say you have to work every single day. I mean, and it's like practicing the flute. You have to always be, you make your own luck when you're doing that. But to believe in what you're doing, even in the rough moments. And I think that's somehow what rubbed off on me from that extraordinary experience that the three of us shared. I mean, it was an extraordinary experience of our lives.
Well, and I guess I would say my takeaway would be that I've played under a lot of conductors, and we've all played under a lot of conductors since then, a lot of great conductors, but none of them to me have been Leonard Bernstein. There's great conductors, but none of them are like he was. So I feel like so happy that I got to experience that, and that it was just so special. And so, I'm an older person in my orchestra now, and even though I'm only 29, no. And so we have a new principal bass player. He's young and very, very good. And he heard that I'd played with Leonard Bernstein, and he came up to me and he said, "You played under Leonard Bernstein. What was it like?" So to me, that was really exciting, because it was like, this still means something to people who have never met him. Like, his legacy really is living on.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I love that.
Just like the 1980s. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for joining me in my podcast today to go down memory lane. Regina Helcher Yost and Alison Young, so sweet to join me today. Thank you so much for being in PorterFlute Pod.
Thanks so much, Amy. It was great. It was great.
So great to see you both. Thank you.
Thank you for being in PorterFlute Pod, and thank you, Izzy and Ella, for helping me produce season 7. If you enjoy our show and you want to review us and rate us, go to Apple Podcasts. You can find our show at PorterFlute.com. And you can find me at amyporter.com and on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube. I'm PorterFlute. Thanks for being in PorterFlute Pod. I'm so grateful for you.